Blessings, everybody. Welcome to the Mysterion Files. We have a phenomenal show today. We're going to be looking into the pattern behind government UFO secrets. You know, for decades, the U.S. government has denied the existence of UFOs. But now, they admit that they are real, but not all the way, only in a partial way. So the question that we should be asking is, what's really going on? Now, in this episode of the Mysterion Files, we're going to explore that question. We're going to also explore the growing pattern behind disclosures that are done by the government. The leaks, the hearings, people coming out known as the whistleblowers. And we're going to see what they are controlling the information flow. Is this the government is slowly revealing the truth, or maybe just managing what we are allowed to know? So we're going to try to examine the evidence, look at the theories, and see what are the deeper implications, including whether UFOs are purely physical or something more. We invite you to join this investigation, and we're going to be digging deep into all of this. Now, this might sound like some of the topics or what we covered in our previous episode, but rest assured that what we're doing here goes much deeper than that. So if you like what we do, the best way for you to support is to make sure that you share this screen, make sure that you hit a like, and if you know, in order to comment live on the show, you must be subscribed. You can be subscribed for a second and chat with us or leave us questions. And one of the reasons why we do that is, number one, we like to keep the trolls out. And number two, we want to make sure that every time you join, you will get a notification that we are live. We're doing this every Thursday, Lord willing, around lunchtime. So make sure, Eastern time, by the way. So make sure that if you catch that after the live stream, make sure that you share it with everybody that you think should be in the know when it comes to these topics. And yes, we're about to start another episode of the Mysterion Files. Thank you for being here. My name is Jorge Hill. I am the producer and co-host of this show. And here we have our host, Brian Hofling. What's going on, brother?
Hey, man. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Yeah, absolutely. Just a phenomenal show we had last time. I really enjoyed myself, and I figured...
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I figured we can do the same thing, and we don't want to waste any more time because we have a lot to cover. You sent me a very, I will say, thorough list of topics that we're going to be dealing with today, and I want to make sure that we do that today. So it appears, right, that this show, obviously, like I said in the intro, overlaps quite a bit with the one that we did last week. But there were some things that you didn't touch or didn't go deep into in our previous show that are actually very, very important and that we want to touch on today's show. We're going to try to go deeper into each one of the topics that we're going to be mentioning in just a second. So let's see if you have any introductory comments regarding each one of these points that we're going to be discussing today that we didn't touch on deeply last time. Number one is, what is a controlled disclosure theory? What is a controlled disclosure theory? Number two is, what do we mean by information management? When we say that the information is being managed from the top down, what do we mean by that? The next one is, what are the competing explanatory frameworks of what's going on, what these phenomena are, what is being leaked, or what is being shared? And the other one is, what constitutes as evidence, meaning where we're going to be entering into the world of epistemology. So do you have any introductory comments for each one of those?
Yeah, so a controlled disclosure basically is the idea that you're going to drip out information. It's kind of like the idea of progressive revelation when we talk about theology. So you're going to have You're going to have control over how much you're letting out, how much you're leaking, or how much you're allowing to come out. With the information management, you mean my skin crawled when you said that, because that's kind of like a computer-based training as CBT we have to do in the military all the time. So it tells us how to control or manage information. And that's just that. You got people and processes in place to manage and control what information is allowed to go out, how it's allowed to go out, what your processes are to stop information from going out, what you're allowed to let out, and all that kind of stuff. And what was the third one?
Oh, the other one is, what are the competing explanatory frameworks?
Oh, right, yeah.
You know,
so you have all kind of different theories about the government letting out information or disclosure. You got the one view is that the government is in complete denial. You got like a continuum. You got on the one side, the government's in a complete denial that there is anything going on,
right? And
that's been the official case. Even just a few years ago, the Air Force had their fact sheet out, which was basically there's no more studying UFOs. There are no UFOs. That was the official position, which was clearly false, given the information that we know was going on. Even after the Blue Book shut down in 69, 70, the government continued to study UFOs. Even major cases like with Rendlesham, for example, in 1980, which is again my favorite case. So,
okay.
So then the other theories would be that they have some kind of agenda. Everything from working with aliens to that they're using the UFO cover to hide our own technology. We're using psyops against other nations. To the idea that we are in the middle of a disclosure right now, that we're going through some kind of a process to disclose. There's a whole range of different views and theories on that.
Interesting. So what counts as evidence, and why do we mention epistemology in the last point?
Yeah, so what counts as evidence? That's a really great question, because you've got one view, which basically is the Fermi paradox, which says, well, if there's so many other beings and aliens and whatever else life out there, why aren't we seeing them? Why aren't we seeing them on the White House lawn, basically? So you've got some people who think that just eyewitness testimony is enough. You want multiple eyewitness testimony, preferably. It's like anything else. You want good, reliable witnesses who haven't been drinking and doing drugs and stuff. You want physical evidence as much as you can get. You want different kinds of sensors. You want radar. You want visual, radiological, all kinds. So what people are willing to go along with and saying, okay, well, this is convincing or not, is different, but there is a threshold. You want people to actually see things and not just have some kind of inward experience.
Yeah.
So when you have a lot of people saying the same thing, especially if we're credible, then you've got a smoking gun there.
That's good. So let's start with the controlled disclosure theory. So there's something worth sitting with here. And if the government is choosing what to release and when, what does that say about everything we've been told so far? In other words, is this truth coming out, or is this just bits and pieces that are being and managed? So that's number one. So if the government is choosing what to release and when, what does that say about what we've been told so far?
Exactly. And there is no question that the government is dripping stuff out. They've kind of been forced to at this point, right? With these different the videos coming out and the congressional hearings and everything. There's really no debate that the government is letting something, because they have to at some point.
Right.
Even though the position is, there's not really any evidence that they're extraterrestrial. They're definitely evidence of UFOs in a general sense, or now what they're calling UAP. So, and that, we're supposed to, we've had this official disclosure from President Trump saying he wants to disclose all the files, right? So the question is, well, what's in the files, and are they really going to disclose them? One thing that the government does and has done since the Freedom of Information Act is to contract a lot of what they don't want people to know about to private companies, because private companies are not subject to FOIA requests. So if you got a person, and FOIA was amazing for UFO studies.
What is that?
So Freedom of Information Act is an act that let private citizens and companies petition for documents or information, and the government had a certain process for following up on that. So if you make a FOIA request, and it's not just about UFOs, it'd be about anything. You make a FOIA request, and the government has a certain length of time and process to give you the information that you're requesting in the government files. And the reason the FOIA made such an impact on UFO studies is because first of all, they would say things, the government would say things and do things, and people would say, okay, I want to know what the files are there. Right. So they make a FOIA request. Well, there are various books that came out based on FOIA information and the processes and everything, but the government got hip to that. And so they started contracting what they were doing to private companies, Lockheed Martin, all these different companies, because they're not subject to these FOIA requests.
Right.
And so the question is, okay, well, is there anything really in the files that, they're going to give us something, but are they going to give us everything? No. That's just silly to think they're going to give us it. They're just not going to. And a lot of it, and people say, well, everything's in the name of national security. And there's some truth to that, because, I wouldn't want them giving everything if it's going to compromise national security.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially processes about how we use radar, how we monitor things, how we gain
there's
information.
Some things that need to be.
Yeah, I mean, there is a legitimate reason for national security. Not every single thing. And like I said last time, it's just, there are some things that we keep in the national security umbrella that we maybe it should, and how they use the process. Everything can be labeled that for reasons that maybe they shouldn't. And that process is very, very clogged and cumbersome.
Right. So, given the fact that they are giving us some information, they're releasing something, and they keeping some things, who actually controls this whole disclosure timeline? Is it an individual, a committee? Is it a whole department? You just brought in private companies dealing with certain information that they don't want out there. Because it feels like we never get the big picture, right? We get bits and pieces, and we have to patch it together.
Yeah. So the directive came from President Trump, but there's no one office that controls information with UFOs. There's no UFO office, except you have AARO, the all domain area, the all domain anomalous resolution office. But there's no, even with Blue Book, there were, while we did have, certain people who were in charge of investigating UFOs, the government is a multi-tiered, and it's fractured in terms of the number of agencies that have information. You got the CIA has information,
right?
FBI, you name it. Even the branches of the military don't work well together in terms of sharing information. So you got the Army having their slice of the pie, the Navy, the Air Force, and they don't always want to play together. So if there's a directive given, say, from the president, then he gives it a timeline, but the organizations have to filter out what they have based on the standards of their classifications. So they can they have to comply, but they have to comply according to their own regulations, and that can take some time.
Interesting. So it's not just one committee, one department, one person. And like you said, Trump was the one that kind of gave the green light for this to start happening. But it's not like he can just, force each one of these departments to put everything in the bucket and just make it available out there. And
he can give the direction, and there can be congressional oversight, and each department, each organization, as it were, has to comply. But how they comply and what their timeline looks like is going to be muddy, because they can't go against, the general. You mentioned information control and all that. You can't go against certain processes.
I get it.
So it takes a while, and then that in itself makes it look like they're hiding something, because it takes on and bureaucracy for information control, even for simple things. And the government overclassifies things. They'll say, "Okay, we're at this level. We're going to classify it at this level just to be careful and be sure." So they're kind of bloated in the level of classification they give things in general. Anyway,
I can see, in even thinking from a perspective of how the government works. It's very slow. It's very sloppy. It's very convoluted. It's got to go to 5. Something's got to one request has to go to 5 different places and get 4 different signatures just to get back to the beginning, to now being sent out and stuff like that. I can imagine how difficult this is, but it does makes it look very, very suspicious, right? Very fishy. And I think that is to the detriment of I will say public opinion, because people, starts to develop or have developed a very, very negative view of how the government is handling all this information. And you have both extremes, some people that don't want anything out, and some people that want everything out, and people like me and you who kind of sit in the middle saying, hey, we deserve more transparency, but also there are things that need to be kept, I will say guarded, for the lack of a better word. So let's go ahead on and look into taking the information management or PSYOPs. First of all, what is a PSYOP?
Psychological operation, and that's where, if we're talking about the military, it's where they are trying to control your mind, your belief, and it can be on different levels. I mean, it can be through actual, agents. I mean, like chemical type agents, but normally a PSYOP is where you're controlling something through perception. Like you might have back in the 2003 invasion of Iraq, they were using really loud music, for example, to freak everybody out. When they were coming to invade, they would just play incredibly loud music to the enemy and just scare them to death, basically. But you've heard there's a spectrum on that too, and so some people will say the Men in Black, for example, are part of a PSYOP. The Men in Black being the people who show up like right after a UFO event happens on your door. They're knocking on your door. They want to talk to you, and they know everything already. Some people will say, that what's really happening isn't really alien abductions as much as it is government abductions. That the government is actually posing as alien. This is an extreme view, of course, but it's one of the views that the government is actually controlling these alleged abductions and everything, and trying to control people with it. Right.
So let's go ahead and let's go there. Is it possible that some of what we are seeing is not disclosure at all, but a PSYOP? And if so, who is the target? Is it the public? Is it foreign governments? Is both of them? I mean, who is, the reason for why they're doing this?
Well, I mean, it's certainly possible that some things are PSYOPs in terms of, especially when it comes to UFO sightings. Whether that's actually happening, of course, is debatable. But the U.S. government, of course, wants to project power and wants to project dominance, as every country does. And so your military, your government, whatever might, if you're trying to do a PSYOP, though, what you're wanting to do is control people's views and control the narrative. And so you had all over the world, countries all over the world since, well, hundreds of years ago, especially with the modern UFO phenomena. You've got countries all over the place having these experiences, and so it's hard to say that a lot of this is one psyop, unless it's some kind of a non-earthly psyop, as it were. And actually, we would probably call it a psyop of a sort, because we think there's a paranormal aspect to this.
Right.
So I think there's a paranormal psyop going on. Now the U.S. it's just kind of hard to tell. So for example, my favorite case, the Rendlesham Forest incident, was investigated by different people. It happened in England on an Air Force base, and the top ufologist, I think alive now, Jacques Vallée, thinks that was a psyop. That some of the Air Force security police saw this craft and even claimed to have touched it, and had all kind of weird things happen. Even the base deputy commander. I don't agree with him on this, but he thinks that was the government trying to see how people would react on a nuclear base at the height of the Cold War when they saw something like this. So it would kind of be like a test, as it were. So the government would test its own people by giving them this crazy event and seeing what they do. So the psyop could be to project power, or it could be to test things.
Yeah, I was going
like
to say, when the government admits to, something like this, how do we know that admission is not itself part of the strategy of the psyop, right?
When you've got a lot of professionals, I mean, the government specializes in controlling the narrative. And you've got agencies like the CIA, who have for decades control things and have virtually no oversight. I mean, the CIA, if you look at the history of the CIA, how they came out of World War II, it started off as a spy organization on other countries, and they quickly grew in competition with the FBI and other thriller agencies, had all kinds of money with virtually no oversight, and just did what they wanted to do. And so even news agencies have been controlled by the CIA, supposedly.
Countries, full
countries, everything. Yeah. And so it's not just a UFO being controlled.
No, it's a lot.
It could be anything.
It's history itself. Right.
Right.
It's very interesting what gets to us. And I know that it was the CIA that developed conspiracy theory. Like, that's a conspiracy theory, right? Like that phrase. I think what they call...
the phrase itself?
Yeah, the phrase itself. They would try to discredit. Somebody will come up with something and they will try to discredit it by saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. That's just a conspiracy theory."
I don't know where that came from.
I heard something along those lines. I don't know if it's true or not, but it was a way to discredit people who were looking into things and says, "Oh no, he's just a fanatic. It's just that's just a conspiracy theorist. You don't have anything to worry about." Kind of to put you at ease. So that's very interesting.
Well, whether they coined that term or not, they did that. So
yeah. Either way, they have utilized that strategy
exactly.
before.
Yeah.
So when we talk about competing explanatory frameworks, we've got at least 4 theories on the table. Let's say that this leaks are alluding to, or maybe what's behind this is some sort of use of high-tech military weaponry or crafts, or maybe technology that is maybe from another country, right? Or the one that we will all like to agree with and to espouse will be this is extraterrestrial or paranormal, right? Or spiritual,
right?
So those are kind of like the 4 angles that we can take here. Can any of these coexist, or do we have to just settle on one?
Oh no, there are multiple ways to there. So there's not just one thing happening. So it's undoubted, it's beyond doubt that the Air Force has used the cover of UFOs to shield our own technology. Okay. I mean, so we've had experimental craft, in the Area 51.
Okay, well, what about the supernatural, right? So can it be an amalgamation of, okay, yes, the U.S. is using ET, right, or UFOs to mask our own technology, But what about other cases where weird things are happening and the government is like, I don't think anything is going on here. But in reality, there's some supernatural stuff going on.
Oh, yeah. Not only are they seeing it, they're using it. And this has been documented, and it's been admitted by the government, especially by the CIA. One of my videos I did on this regarding, UFOs and the Men in Black and all these kind of things. The government believes in the paranormal, maybe more than some Christians do, who are basically what I consider Christian naturalists, not nationalists, but naturalists.
It's funny. I was gonna say this because I remember good old Heiser used to say that he had an easier time evangelizing in a UFO convention than he did at church. That was one of his favorite sayings. I actually have a T-shirt.
Yeah.
You can actually buy a T-shirt that has that phrase because it was one of his kind of most memorable things. And it has the big word UFO here in the chest, and then a quick paragraph. And he says, it's easier to evangelize at a UFO convention than at your own church.
Yeah, because they're open to it. Sure.
Yeah.
But you can have some things happening that are just misidentifications. I was out at my in-laws' house a couple of weeks ago and went outside, and there was a star. There was something in the sky, and it looked like it was moving. I mean, it looked like it was really, moving this way and up and down. But I knew what star it was. It was Sirius. It was, if you use the belt of Orion to get to it, it's the brightest star in the sky north of Miami. And so I knew what it was, but it looked like it was moving. And so, you got a lot of people who aren't. I'm kind of familiar with the sky because that's one of my hobbies.
Right. You have telescopes. I
love the backyard astronomy. I remember
when you came here, you showed me an app that will actually kind of use the gyroscope to kind of pinpoint what you're looking up on the sky.
Safari. There's a lot of them like that.
And so about these things, but for a lot of people that might come across as fantastic or otherworldly.
Yeah, so I mean, people who have seen Venus, for example, which is just a planet, bright, looks like a bright star, and they'll think that's because it's so bright, or a comet, various things that are naturally explained. And most things are explained naturally or some kind of misidentification. But you've got some things that are used as a screen, some things that are really paranormal, I think. So there's no one explanation for all. All kinds of things that can be happening.
Yeah. So that's what it makes, and that's good. That's good that we take that angle because again, just like we talked about in our live stream last night on classical theology, people have tribalistic mindsets, and sometimes it's either just their way or the highway, right? And it has to be the government, or it has to be aliens, or it has to be the paranormal. But it cannot be a combination of the three of two of them. Yeah,
and we're seeing this with you mentioned the Bigfoot thing last week. There's a whole thing going on in the Bigfoot community right now.
Yeah,
because there's a documentary that came out, and it's going to be coming out publicly in a few months. But it was screened at a Bigfoot festival in Texas, saying they have information that the Patterson-Gimlin film, the famous Bigfoot film, was a hoax. And so you got people who, and that's your question. Well, what counts as evidence? There are factions that like almost nothing will convince them that was a hoax, whether it was or wasn't, and they have this tribalistic mindset. And you've got people. That was a grenade in that community.
And let's focus on epistemology, because this is a big one. What it would actually take to convince you, like what kind of evidence would you need to see to say, okay, that settles it, right? That's one side of the coin. And if we
in terms of what, alien or what?
In terms of, so let's start at, because we talk about different frameworks, right? And in terms of, let's actually group the alien paranormal, or the paranormal and the extraterrestrial, right? In those two categories, let's think in those two categories.
All right.
Right. So what kind of evidence would you need to say, okay, that settles it for me that there are biologics. And by now, our audience should know what biologics are, because we We explained it in the last episode. If you don't know what it is, you can go back to the last episodes. We did an unpacking of what biologics are, right? And also they will tell you that these things are also paranormal, but not just some ghostly apparition, but a demonic force that it is interacting with us. So, and on the flip side, is there any type of evidence that the government could release that that we still well, let's focus on that one, and then I answer this one because I need that information in order to be able to kind of make an assessment of where to go here with the question.
So for me, you've had people saying that the government possesses crashed craft since the late 70s.
Right.
You've got people saying we've possessed dead aliens, all that from Roswell.
Right. We talk about now that last episode too. Yeah.
In 2023, you've had David Grush come out and saying we have crashed craft, we have biologics or aliens in possession. The issue there is you would want to especially for either one of those really, whether it's craft or biologics, you're gonna want for that kind of thing. For me personally, you're gonna have to have some kind of you're gonna have to demonstrate it, not just say it. Now, for just UFO sightings and different experiences, all that we have for the most part are eyewitness testimony. We don't really have, as J. Allen Hynek used to say, he was an astronomer and the head scientist for the Air Force and published that Blue Book. He would say, we don't study UFOs, we study UFO reports.
That's true.
We don't have any UFOs. So, when you've got essentially millions of people saying they've seen things and they're very similar, that shows, and especially when you've got people saying we got on a radar and incredible people and all kind of stuff, multiple eyewitnesses, that's going to tell you that something probably is real about that. When it comes to things like we have possession of craft or actual aliens, then I because there hasn't been any demonstration, I'm more skeptical on that. So for me, that would take, okay, here it is. So if you want to convince me there's an alien, then you better, here it is, right? Well, I gotta have one of those.
You gotta have one of those.
A real. You gotta have
a real.
Rosie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you gotta show me the money. I'm not from Missouri, but you gotta show me. But you gotta have the scientific community go in there and actually test it, not just somebody saying that we have it. The trust me, bro approach won't work with that kind of stuff.
Well, let me flip it now and go into the supernatural, the spiritual, right? Because this is a big one here, especially for what we're disclosing. Well, if the supernatural, the spiritual, so for the biologics, you will need some sort of scientific testing and some validation because they're physical. Now, for the spiritual paranormal, we also have reports of this, but it actually, this is something that we cannot touch, smell, we cannot interact with it in a physical way. So what would it be? What kind of evidence do you need in this realm to say, okay, this settles it? And I'm trying to be the devil's advocate here push you hard because this is something that you do spouse. This is something do you hold. The audience need to know where we stand, both of us, on this. And we do believe that these paranormal phenomena are somehow, we don't know how, but somehow tied or connected to demonic, the spiritual and the demonic and the occult.
Yeah. Well, there are several arguments against the physical alien theory that you would expect to be true. Like we just don't have any kind of physical evidence at all. And these things kind of defy physics, as it were. And so that kind of leans people away if you're studying this from a holistic point of view. They're taking all the data and say, well, if it was physical, you would expect these physical traces or you would have some of these kind of things. For a spiritual side, and I used to question, I mentioned this last time, I think, I used to question why would demons care if we believe in this kind of stuff?
Right.
Because even and what got me interested in this again was the non-Christian and even anti-Christian researchers saying the same thing we're saying basically, and trying to make it a little bit different. And well, it seems paranormal, but well, for us who hold to a Christian worldview, you would expect everything in reality has to fit into a Christian worldview. It's not just some things over here and we're going to put this in a box over here. Everything's got to fit into the worldview. So how would aliens fit in that worldview? Well, as like you got like Joe Jordan saying, you've got people who are having these experiences with these so-called aliens, but their behavior and the experience stops when Jesus' name is invoked. Well, that would be evidence that there's more spiritual aspect to it as well. And you couldn't look for physical evidence for that because there is no physicality to the encounter, except for the fact that spiritual beings can have an effect on the physical.
Right.
And they can even this is seen in the Bible, they can have effects on the physical, but they're not in themselves physical.
Yeah. So
is that getting at your question now?
Well, sure. You know what I'm trying to figure out here, and I hope that other people have the same inquiry. It will be the idea of, would you have to have an encounter like that, and how would you gauge the veracity, the truth of this? Because I know that you already you have a framework to show that the supernatural or the spiritual or the demonic is a reality, right? We talked about it last night with doing it.
Sure.
Was a theistic God exists? You can move from that to spiritual phenomena because God is a spirit, right? So you have the prime reality is a spirit. So actually, physicality is almost like an add-on to that reality. Right?
It is, yeah.
So it is, yeah. So because the real plane of existence is the physical is a property of a reality that is even, I won't say more pure, but I wouldn't say more pure, but I will say more, closer to the source, which is the spiritual world, right?
Right.
That I want to be theologically sound and correct as well. So, I think that in this type of shows, as well as the classical theology show, I believe that a precision of language and precision of the usage of the terms is important. Right. But so what I was trying to say is, you said that for a biologic, you need, a physical body of an extraterrestrial being studied and shown that it comes from out there. Right.
Right.
And so for the spiritual, how would you test that claim? What will say, hey, this is real? And we're talking about, in the biologic side, it will be a report of an alien that leads to a corpse of an alien, physical biological being, that leads to an autopsy that shows that it's not from around here. Right. So think about that framework, but on the spiritual side of things, on the demonic of the,
Right. Yeah. So and as I tell people all the time, you got to have good sources. And especially in this area, because, when it comes
why?
Because when it comes to things like science, history, math, philosophy, almost anything else, if you're going to write on a topic, you normally have certain credentials. Like, if you're going to be an academic author or be authority, you have some kind of credentials. Anybody can say anything. First of all, either on a blog or nowadays with self-publishing, anybody can write a book or say anything they want. So you've got to be careful about what you read and what you base your claims on for anything. So even when it comes to, just normal everyday things, you want to make sure you're listening to credible people. And that's even 10 times more important here because this gets weird. And a lot of people want to be the weirder the better. And a lot of times we want a weird explanation. So what counts as evidence for me as first of all, you've got a lot of people saying the same thing. that do not have any kind of motive. So you're going to ask, okay, what's the motive for saying this?
Right.
You know, I was at the Mothman Festival a couple of years ago, and I was talking to one of the people who run the show up there, and they said that there were about 100 plus reports of people back in the late 60s, mid-late 60s, seeing Mothman, but how many more didn't come forward? Right. And we think that UFO reports, we only maybe have about 10% roughly, because people don't want to be called crazy, especially if you're in the military, you're a pilot. You start saying things like that, they're going to be like, well, we might want to pull that guy's pilot's credentials. So there's a lot of reasons why you don't say things. So when people are saying things and there's a lot of there's no motivation, they're saying the same kind of things. We have corroborative evidence with radar, multiple people saying the same thing, and it doesn't seem to be physical in nature. And you've got the government having investigations where they're also admitting that this is paranormal, or you've got the investigators saying, you know, we went to Skinwalker Ranch or whatever, did this, and we came home and these weird things happen. And that's not atypical. There's a pattern. We're talking about patterns today. There's a pattern to that. Then that would be in my view, evidence of what's going on. And so the kind of evidence we're talking about is determined by the kind of explanation we're talking about. So if you're talking about physical beings, you should have physical evidence. If you're talking about spiritual beings or paranormal, you're going to have that kind of evidence. And you have those kind of things happening with people. Like when they have a closer encounter, you have these paranormal things going. You have the ghosts showing up. You've got knocking on the door, no one's there. How would that happen, by the way?
Right.
You got Bigfoot and stuff. All these things happening. You know, voices of no one who's there. These weird things. Those are the kind of things you look for with the paranormal.
Okay. Well, that's very, very good. So now that we have this clear, we looked into the possible explanations. Let's go back to the government, because we see that there is a cycle. Number one is, let's deny everything, look the other way, there's nothing here, and then somebody leaks something, and then there is a partial admission. Oh yes, you got us. That's true, right? But it's true in this way.
Yes, that's right. It's true, but
it's true, but and then silence. They stop talking about it. They don't go back to it. You completely. Right. It's almost like it departs the consciousness of the culture for a long time, and then guess what? It happens again, and then you remember a couple of years ago that this happened, and whatever happened to that, and then it fizzles out again. So. Why does it always starts with a flat-out denial? What does the government gain from denying something for decades before eventually walking it back?
There's several reasons. I think one thing is control. And there was because if you say that, you know, for example, one of the most interesting cases of UFOs happened on an Air Force base that has intercontinental ballistic missiles that are nuclear. And there was a UFO that just kind of popped up at the gate, and they were over these areas. And these missiles are controlled independently. They're not linked together. But they lost control of them. They couldn't, they powered down and they lost control. And the government's not going to want to admit that kind of thing.
Right.
Because now the same thing happened in Russia, but in reverse. They had an experience where a nuclear weapon was armed by one of these things, and it got disarmed kind of at the last second. Thank God. And you've got an author who says basically the government got an article out there that's been out there for a while now, and it says the government basically cannot talk about these kinds of things because it's taboo, because they would seem to, at least through perception, have lost control. And so for a lot of things, it's control. And I would think that there's some legitimacy to this. You know, you don't want your enemies knowing where your weaknesses are with your weapons. And I'm all about secrecy with that kind of stuff. I don't want full disclosure when it comes to keeping us safe.
Yeah, you've been branch hopping for a while now. I was
Yeah,
thinking about it.
yeah.
You've been in branch hopping, right, from each branch of the military. So you have an insight that most people don't have into how important somebody's discretion is,
Right.
for us, right? Yeah,
Right.
So let me ask you a question regarding another one of the second kind of steps in the cycle, which is, who's doing the leaking. Could it be that this is also a control way to kind of drip out some of this information? And are they, or is this just people are these heroes that says, hey, I got my hands on this. I don't care if I spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm going to share these, or are they, just like you just say, threats to national security or something more complicated?
I tend to think it's more people who are leaking it of themselves. Sometimes you had, like I mentioned again last time, the CIA intentionally putting out things. Oh yeah, we're going to desensitize people to the UFO lore, so that when they see things, because they will, they don't think anything about it. They get used to it, basically. So you got that. But a lot of the times the people come out, especially this newer disclosure, that's been happening since 2017 forward, are people taking upon themselves, like Lou Elizondo, for example, in his book Imminent. And he was a military person and worked at the Pentagon, and he actually was kind of in charge of the UFO program, ATIP. Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. And he quit his job in protest because they wouldn't let him disclose it the way he wanted to. Huh. And so then he started doing his own thing with disclosure and the History Channel documentary Unidentified and all this kind of thing. You've got the people at the New York Times who are putting this out there, the Navy pilot, the leaking, someone leaked there from inside. You have to, because they're the ones who had control of that, the videos, and so I think a lot of it is people who are doing their own leaking, and the government at that point just can't stop it.
All right. So what's the logic of this? Partial admission. What is it always partial? What do they say if the leak is bold enough to put it out there? Somehow they figure out a way to handicap the information that has been released.
Yeah, so sometimes people, if you take Rush, for example, if we say something that sounds crazy, like we got biologics, that sounds unbelievable to begin with. So people are going to say things that they even think are true. That alone is enough to make them sound crazy sometimes. Then you got people who are, they're being threatened by people. So if you say anything else, that'll be it for you, kind of thing. Or they want to get the leak out there just enough so that the public has awareness, so that they will go after the government. And people have been doing that since the 50s, with NICAP, for example, these UFO groups, like Major Kehoe from the Marines, who was a major, he was in the Marine Corps, and got out and started this UFO thing and tried to have congressional hearings. I think that at some point, when it came to this, the government forced, as Trump did this back in 2020, and forced from the UAP task force, and in 2021, Office of the Director of National Intelligence report to Congress. It was a little 9-page report. So some of this has been forced by higher up people, and in trying to give some disclosure. But then you got other people saying, well, you've got Arrow, for example, who seem like it's just another government filter that doesn't want to tell us everything. That becomes again another conspiracy theory, to use a phrase you brought up a little bit ago.
Yeah.
So, but I think if you mean why did the individuals only give us so much? I don't know. So you got some who are just who maybe trying to be anonymous, people who are giving us more. Like you got the guy who wrote the book Day After Roswell, who was a high up military person who is giving us a lot of information that seems to be false, if you look at other reports, like Joseph Alexander, who also was high up in the military. There's no one reason. There's just a lot of different, depends on the situation and a lot of different things going on.
So let me ask you just because this is kind of like the end of the cycle that resets everything else, and it's this whole idea of like the silence. Why does the public let this silence kind of take over? And it happens every single time, right? They kind of forget about it. And I know there's a small cluster of people that continue to kind of push the issue, but they go totally unnoticed. You have a news cycle. Everybody is up in arms. The reports about this, that, and the third, and then all of a sudden, that kind of gets shelved until the next time. Why do you think?
I think that's a pattern with things in general. This happens with all kind of stuff. You'll have protests and then it just fizzles out. I probably because people don't know what to do. You want to force the government's hand. You don't know how to do that. So you try it in the courts. You try it with FOIA. You try it with congressional hearing. You try to contact your representative in government. But you don't want. You can't start a physical revolt because that's going to get you in trouble.
Right.
So I think this is a pattern, not just with this, but with all kind of things. Is that getting at your question at all?
Yeah. I just I'm here.
Just the nature of
trying to figure out. Yeah, I guess that has to do a lot with human nature too, right? Mm-hmm. We'll look at the mirror and then forget what our face looks like.
But look where we were 15 years ago. I mean, most people, including me, if you start talking about UFOs and aliens, you think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's like, the government's admitting to some degree.
I thought you was going to prove it now. You can say with certainty that you are crazy. So I thought, a little bit,
obviously, but
no, but this is, I mean, when we look back at the history, you just mentioned Arrow, right? Mm-hmm. But we had 8ATIP and UAPTF. You know this better than I do. What are those departments or organizations were? Are we actually making progress in the area of UFOs or UAPs, paranormal, or is this just the government kind of relabeling, reshuffling the same deck under a new name and kind of putting us into just the same kind of game loop that we've been?
I think there's progress made in different ways. First of all, again, the public, maybe even most today, think the UFO thing is, so when they post a story on the news, I tend to look at the comments. And so when they post UFO stories, I look at the comments and people still think this is just nuts. It is a deflection from, the Epstein files or something. It's just the government trying to take us away from the economy or whatever else. But I think in general that there has been a lot of progress in terms of data getting out there, because the government can try to spin it in various ways, but the data is more well known now, and also because of the rise of the internet. Because if things are happening prior to the internet, it's a lot harder to get things out there. But even this show right here, and this could be, there's no way to, unless the country suppresses the internet, you're not going to be able to stop it. Right. So I mean, the flow of media in general has made all of this easier to grasp, and so the knowledge of the events has grown exponentially. And people are more aware of it and talking more openly, even the government. Yeah,
and I think people are making connections that maybe other people who had their hands on this information prior made, and now it's becoming more mainstream. And and that happens a lot when more people start putting their minds into it and seeing the connections and see how things kind of work together, or they make I will say progress together, instead of just being a one loner guy trying to figure everything else out, by himself. So I think that's a good good way to.
And there have been organizations that do that. Like you got MUFON, probably is the most well known.
Say that again.
Group. MUFON, Mutual UFO Network.
Okay.
And you had, J. Allen Hynek's group, QFOS, which was Center for UFO Studies. So there are civilian groups doing things, even in academia. There are groups doing that, and even those groups were infiltrated by the government to try to see what they're doing and try to control it. So the government's been, and you talk about psychological warfare or psyops and things. The government's tried to control the narrative on this and try to infiltrate the groups to see what they know and try to control them. But there are people have been, in a sense, rising up, trying to study these things, trying to get movement, and we've seen a lot of that in the last few years with acknowledgement and what the government has told us about.
Well, that's good. I think that we're moving in the right direction, and like I said, I think it's just going to be difficult to strike a balance between what needs to be disclosed and what needs to be kept under wraps. I think that's also. I think that's the balancing act that is going to be difficult.
And what a lot of ufologists tell us is that the actual cases that have happened, the sightings, whatever, are largely known publicly already.
Right.
It's the how we gather information, the sensors and these kind of things that are more secret, and we don't want that getting out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's how our enemies will use it against us.
They utilize,
Right.
So what have we actually learned from everything that it has been officially disclosed? Like, if you had to summarize the net gain in real knowledge, what's on that list?
Well, first of all, that it's real. I mean, so from the New York Times story, from all these different, the ATIP and everything, and then the government coming out with all these hearings, is that the UFO thing, they're not saying it's alien, but there are things that are, by definition, UFOs because they're unidentified, they're flying, they're objects.
Right.
Of course, they're calling UAP now.
Yeah.
And they're admitting that there also is a flight safety risk because a lot of these, there have been pilots who have, and a number of them who have had near misses with these things, whatever they are. And we've known, I think one interesting thing is that the government, they know there's a paranormal aspect to this. And not only are they trying to study it, they're trying to use it. I mean, we have admissions on the CIA website, again, that they try to use and harness, the military too, try to harness things like remote viewing and psychological type powers to use it against our enemies and for our own collection processes. And so this kind of thing is interesting in itself. So just, I guess, one, that these things are real in some sense. They're not saying what they are. They don't know what they are by definition. There wouldn't be UFOs, but the acknowledgement that these things are in some way real. And even high up. So you got Lou Elizono's book saying that there were generals in the Pentagon saying we know what they are and they're demonic. Of course, Lou didn't like that explanation because he wanted a military explanation. He wanted a physical explanation, and thought that. And in fact, the generals were saying don't even get near it, don't study it, just leave it alone, kind of thing. So. The actual data is getting out there. Now it's time to explain it.
Yeah. And I hope we can get that explanation out in the open sooner than later. But it's not up to us. Like I said, ironically, we do have to get access to those sources, and those sources are heavily guarded. I don't know who said this. Was it Churchill? That the truth is so important that it's usually heavily guarded by a what does he call it? What he says, the truth is so important that it's usually heavily guarded by bodyguard or for lies or something like that. It was I forgot the actual quote. But the idea is that the truth has to be guarded, and the way to do that is to surround this truth by lies to make sure that some people don't get their hands on it.
That's exactly what the Air Force did. So the Air Force Office of Special Investigations would run counterintelligence operations, and they would use UFOs as a cover. And the guy would say the public knows like 20% of what they have is true. They just don't know which part is true.
Oh, yeah, that's a good kind of say that again, because that's a good juicy tip right there.
Yeah, so Richard Doty, who's a well-known Air Force operative, he was in the Office of Special Investigations, OSI, and he would run counterintelligence for the Air Force. And he would, when people would see things, and this is like in the area, of Area 51, Groom Lake, all that area where they were testing out experimental aircraft. He would say, 20% of what the people think they know about UFOs is true. Right. They just don't know what 20% because we're infiltrating it with lies.
Right. So they weave the lies in there to make it hard to pinpoint what actually happened. Right. What are the parts that are actually true?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see how that.
It's like being in a house of mirrors. There's one person in all those mirrors and all those reflections that's true. You just can't tell which one is it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. But before we wrap up, I would like to ask you something that I think is really important for everyone watching now, and if they're watching the replay. Let's forget the specific theories for a second. The focus here for all of us should be, excuse me, what are the tools that we should be taking from this show and applying them to our day-to-day when we hear things related to UFOs, the paranormal, extraterrestrials, whatever. For example, when someone walks away from this conversation and the next, UFO, UAP headline drops, what should they be asking themselves? How do you actually think through this kind of topics, this stuff, in a way that keeps you from either believing everything or dismissing everything? As I said before, in this specific area, you have to be extra vigilant because there is a lot of deception. Even the non-Christian people who are studying this are saying that the whatever these beings are, and they don't think they're aliens, a lot of them don't, whatever they are, they're deceptive. They're tricksters. And so when people study these things, they just got to be really careful they're not being deceived. So when people have these encounters, they'll think it's one thing over here, but it's really this thing over there. And so when we see these stories about, what is really going on, you have to start being critical and not dismiss you can't dismiss everything. There's too much out there to dismiss. At this point, it is undeniable that there is a UFO phenomena. If someone says to me, Brian, there's no such thing as UFOs, this is all just hoaxes, misidentifications, what that tells me is that person has done zero homework.
Yeah.
Because there's too much credibility for us to know that there actually is something real, but it might not be ET. It might be something over here.
Yeah.
So you need to learn how to think critically. You need to learn how to analyze sources. And if you want to be knowledgeable about this topic, which is why the show exists,
right, then
you need to read the sources. You need to read Jacques Vallée and John Keel, Hynek, and people, Richard Dolan, who I don't agree with Richard Dolan's assessment as to what he concludes to aliens, but he's got the best history books out there that I've read on what's been going on since the 40s or even before them. And so we need to read the people and be familiar with what the actual ufologists are saying, and keep up with what the government's saying, and just be critical. I mean, I just read a story yesterday that said that Matt Gates said that there are aliens among us, that they are here. And so it was, of course, it was April 1st. I'm like, well, this is an April Fool's joke. Right. Didn't appear to be.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful what you read, and don't read something and then just automatically take it as the gospel truth. Yeah. Be critical about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also at the same time, recognize the fact that there is a phenomena and that it is very, very deceptive.
Yeah, that's true. So any last line before we wrap it up today? It's not tonight.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks if you're here live, thanks for being here. If you're watching it, thanks for watching it. Leave us a comment. You can support us by liking the video, by sharing, by subscribing. And we try to have fun here at the Mysterion Files, trying to talk about the paranormal. You know, my shirt, you can't read all of it.
Absolutely.
It says, the paranormal, explaining the unexplainable.
Yeah.
So, but we do it from a Christian point of view, and we want to help people understand the truth while having fun at the same time.
And excellent. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, stay curious, stay skeptical, and we'll see you next time on the Mysterion Files. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a wonderful hour. Talked a little bit about everything. And I think that, we have to keep our little antennas up and look for reliable sources, learn the ins and outs of how these items have been handled. And maybe we can pick out the parts of the narrative that are true and put them down into the puzzle, the pieces of the puzzle, and come up with a proper picture of what we're seeing out there. Now, the beautiful thing about being a individual that holds to a Christian worldview is that Christian worldview gives us a perfect a framework to put these pieces down and help us to get closer to the truth related to spiritual beings, UFOs, and other entities that, as Brian says, there's undoubtedly there is a phenomena out there. There is a UFO. There's something out there unidentified that comes bumping into the night, and we know this. So again, this is the end of the stream, but we will continue this, Lord willing. Let us know if you like it. Let us know if you enjoy it. Let us know if you have questions. We will be adding an email address to the show, especially down on the scroller. That way you can send us questions that we can deal with during the show. And if you have articles, video clips that you want to analyze, if you have direct questions, or maybe you have a testimony about any of this, then we will absolutely be mindful of dealing with this here in the Mysterion Files. And with that being said, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. See you soon.